Good morning. Welcome all to our chat this morning. My name's Greg. I've got Jim with me today, and we're going to be talking about how we can achieve up to 40% efficiency gains around a typical HVAC business. I'm Director of Product at Joblogic, been around the industry for around 30 years. From two perspectives really, obviously from a Joblogic perspective around solutions and product, but also from the other side of the fence, having owned a commercial cleaning company and an IT network installation company. Jim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Jim. I'm CEO at Joblogic. Been in the industry for 25 years. Started as an employee at a refrigeration firm, and then built a software company servicing that industry and the wider HVAC industry. And I'm excited to be here to talk about some challenges in the industry and some ideas around improving productivity for field service teams in HVAC.
Thanks, Jim. So obviously, when we're talking about HVAC, we're talking about assets, and one of the main problems around the HVAC industry has been poor asset information.
Yeah, I think it's an issue for contractors initially when they're tendering for service and maintenance contracts, that sometimes the quality of the asset data they're given by the customer isn't always complete. So there's a survey element to the job. Obviously, they have to do a walk around and collect that asset data.
Sure.
Sometimes they're provided with asset data, but it can be poor quality, there can be gaps in it. And the challenge is hydrating that data, making sure that it's complete, because if it's not complete, there's difficulties around accurately quoting for maintenance, and there's difficulties then around maintaining compliance going forward. So as a fundamental pillar of success, really, asset data's got to be good at the start. It's got to be put into a system where it can then be maintained and it doesn't go stale immediately.
I think you're right, and I think particularly around HVAC, there's complexity around assets with the parent-child relationship along, particularly in aircon, and knowing the relationship and being able to visualise how they hang together on sites.
Yeah, I mean, what tools would you think about when you think about maintenance of asset data? So let's say that you have actually got some clean data at the start of the contract. It's been imported into a system, and then you want to make sure that you've got accurate reporting on the health and condition of assets going forward. What sort of tools would be useful for a field engineer?
And that's the key, isn't it? It's linking that back office to the field-based staff, because they're at the coalface gathering that information and also need that information when they're going to perform that maintenance. So being able to visualise that asset data to the field-based staff via some sort of mobile device or solution is key.
Yeah, because then they can access the history of the asset. What about like asset tagging? That seems to be a popular theme nowadays, because if you take the HVAC industry, a lot of the assets can be in similar locations, fairly crowded. I mean, how do we overcome that in terms of keeping the data clean and making sure the engineer knows what he's servicing?
I think there's a number of things to consider there. Obviously, QR coding or some sort of tagging electronically can be really useful for that. I think what we're seeing more of now as well is 3D floor planning, where we can actually map those assets on a 3D plan of the building, which can lead to maintenance routes and obviously gains in efficiency from an engineer's perspective. Not only that, but it also means that when a customer is reporting a fault on an asset, by being able to scan a QR code or something like that, we know we're talking about which particular asset. Right, you know, the aircon unit on the ground floor could mean anything.
Okay. And then I suppose there's an opportunity as well for attachments for assets. So as well as the QR coding, you could be looking at images, you could be looking at OEM manuals, and potentially spare parts lists.
And of course, really important in the HVAC industry, those F-gas asset logbooks, which is a legal requirement around those kind of assets.
Yeah, but typically, how is that carried out and tracked now? Historically,
it's been a logbook that's attached to the asset, right? And they often go missing, or they don't get filled in, or they get lost, or whatever. So an electronic solution to that, with compliance in mind, but also with legislation in mind, because those kind of logbooks, as we all know, have to follow a particular pattern and hold particular information. Being able to have those electronically held in the cloud, everybody can access them that needs to, and they can't go missing. We can evidence compliance in a much more efficient manner if we hold that information electronically.
So in addition to be able to evidence to your client that you've done maintenance, that you've got an up-to-date asset register, the extra benefit then would be the transaction history of all of the gas usage.
For the engineer as well, not only transactional history, but also what's happened on that asset.
Right, okay. And then calculation of global warming potential for every piece of equipment in the building.
Exactly.
Okay. And then how do you then recommend that information is shared with the client in terms of an F-gas logbook, for example?
I think the most obvious solution is some sort of customer portal, giving real-time visualization of not only asset logbook data, but asset data in general. What's happened, asset history. Are we doing what we said we would do at the time we would say it around maintenance scheduling? All of this stuff can be visualized via a customer portal.
Yeah, and one of the things that comes up when you talk to HVAC contractors is the challenges around cylinder tracking, the return of cylinders, the creation of waste transfer notices.
Absolutely.
This is time consuming for the back office and the engineers.
It is, and also with what's happening with F-gas and the move towards more friendly gases that are replacing those F-gases and have to be compatible with them, you need to know what gas is where, how much you've got, and what we can and can't use in that asset.
Yeah. And then on the cylinder tracking side, there's penalties for late return of cylinders.
Absolutely, financial.
There's an admin burden behind making sure that we know where the cylinders are in the business, whether they're in an engineer's vehicle, whether they're stored on a customer site, or whether they're in the warehouse.
Absolutely, and linking that to some sort of stock management system outside of the transactional data also allows us to track cost of that gas. We know it's not cheap.
Yeah, okay. Going back to, we opened by talking about the challenges around asset management. I suppose another thing that's important now is the life cycle tracking of asset condition, the capital cost to replace, and helping contractors to advise their customer on installation projects where an asset's reached the end of its lifetime and needs to be replaced.
Absolutely. Tracking CapEx against OpEx, understanding what that asset has cost you to maintain over the specific period of the contract, and being able to collate that information efficiently and quickly and share that with the customer is paramount.
Okay. So I suppose the summary is, in an ideal scenario, from a contractor's perspective, we get decent asset data at the start, whether that's in the form of a spreadsheet or manual logbook. That data is inputted into a centralised field service system where the asset data can then be hydrated by the field engineer who's in front of the asset with the mobile application. Mm-hmm. And then as we start to do work through the system, we update that system. And then we've got the asset history all in one place.
Which we then can visualise to the customer. Of course, a key point around that, we mentioned field-based operatives. We've got to also understand that there has to be a simple process for the engineer to capture this information in the first place, because we know that engineers aren't going to want to fill in pages and pages and pages of information, electronically or otherwise, at the point of maintaining or servicing an asset. So there has to be a very simple workflow around capturing that information. Otherwise, we'll never get it.
What challenges have you seen when we're trying to onboard engineers to using a mobile app and taking them away from a legacy paper system or a legacy software system? Is it just a training exercise, or is it convincing engineers of the benefits of adopting the software in the first place? I
think it's a bit of both, and I think it's change management, isn't it, fundamentally, especially for engineers that have been around the industry for a while. They're set in their ways, they know how they do things, and asking them to start pressing buttons with big fat fingers, should we say, it's not always well received. But I think visualising the efficiency gain in their day is the key to getting them to adopt that system.
Are you saying start with younger engineers, then work on the older boys later?
Maybe.
Okay,
so we've talked about visualising information to the customer, giving them the access to that real-time information. What do you think the typical customer for a HVAC company is looking for now? What sort of information do you think they're needing at their fingertips?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think having been around this for a long time now and being involved in a lot of sales processes for software, what I'm hearing from the customers on the contracting side is that there's a bigger demand than ever before for information, and especially real-time information from customers, which perhaps 10 years ago wasn't as prominent. So in some cases, what the customers say to me, the contractors say to me, is that the quality of the information they provide is almost as important as the quality of the work that they provide.
Yeah, it's all about that Uberization, isn't it? That Uber experience. They want to know exactly where they're at any point in time.
I think so. And also, everybody's become a little bit more tech savvy. The clients themselves might have their own systems. And there's an expectation that a HVAC contractor will have some sort of management system. And often now that's coming up as a requirement when they're tendering for maintenance contracts, that they have to be able to evidence information digitally in real time. So
we talk about real time. I suppose we're talking about real time notifications around an engineer attending, an engineer being on site, an engineer completing some work, those kind of things.
yeah, and those sorts of automations can be really useful from a contractor's perspective, because if you've got the ability to send a real-time status update, like the ones you mentioned, so engineer is now on the way to this visit has now been attended, this visit has been completed with some evidence, sort of photos, signatures, compliance documentation. That is really cutting down on a back office admin burden, where that service desk operative is not having to answer the call to the customer and give them an update, because the update has been delivered into their email inbox, onto their phone via SMS. Or for more, I suppose, proactive clients, they're actually logging onto the portal and seeing for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the customer portal option also gives an element of self-serve from the customer's perspective as well. So they can have the immediacy of creating a job in the portal, which automatically creates itself in the contractor's management system and alerts them to the fact that there's a new job.
Yeah, and from a contractor's perspective, if there's remedial work to be done, if there's quotes to be raised, they can be visualised in the portal and get a much faster turnaround time on getting that work done.
Yeah, and one of the benefits there would be contractor is quoting for work that they've recommended, the ability for the customer to come in and approve that electronically, whilst having a full visual about what they're being quoted for. And other stuff which might be a little bit more trivial, like being able to access historic invoices and download them on demand without having to put a manual request into the contractor. But I think one of the big things is the ability to visualise meaningful information back to the client. So dashboard data, compliance data. What the clients are really interested in is exceptions. So when a job's done and everybody's happy and there's no repeat work, that's fine, that's there as a reference point. But what they really want to know is, what is still a problem at my building? What is going to cause me a problem with my colleagues if I don't get this fixed? So from a facilities manager's point of view, using the portal, they're looking for exception data and they're looking for resolutions to those exceptions.
Okay, Jim, so when you're talking to HVAC contractors, typical HVAC companies, what are the pain points you're typically hearing? What are the main problems that these guys are bumping into?
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that I speak to, they're looking to grow their businesses, they're looking to take more market share, and they're looking to obviously increase profit margins. And there's a few challenges around that. One is that one that everybody's talking about is a skilled labour shortage, so a shortage of engineers. Going back to what we've just been talking about, the customer's demand for real-time information creates more admin burden on their back office, so that their back office staff are potentially spending less time scheduling engineers to jobs and creating efficiencies and reporting back to customers. So that's a challenge. And I think, given the fact that it's not easy to go and hire new engineers, also these contractors have got to create an environment where they don't have a lot of employee churn and they retain their best engineers as well. Because if there's a shortage of skills, then people become in demand and they can move companies. So what's encouraging engineers to stay at a business as well and to grow with that business? So there's probably a few things we can talk around about how contractors can optimise their operations to make sure that A, they're retaining staff, B, they are enticing new people to come and work there and a good destination for engineers to go to. And then what sort of efficiencies can we gain both in terms of the back office and for field teams to increase profit margins and increase efficiency generally?
Yeah, so on that first point you made around the skilled labour shortage, is the answer to leverage tech, to automate more?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a biased position, given the fact that I run a tech company, but I think everybody looks to tech for automation and efficiency gains. we've mentioned a few things. So customer demand for information. Now, lots of customers will be sending jobs to contractors in different ways. They might be emailing jobs, they might be calling jobs through, they might be using the portal, or they might have their own system. Now, a lot of customers have their own CAFM systems.
Yep.
They're creating jobs in there and then manually sending that job to a contractor who has to re-enter that into whatever management system they've got. So if you have a system that's got the ability to integrate through APIs, one way that we can cut down on double entry of data is to automate that process and have the jobs being created automatically. It might be at the other end of the process, when we've invoiced the job, that there's a finance package, an automation to the finance package to stop that rekeying of invoice data can also be critical in time saving as well.
Sure.
So those are a couple of examples.
And I think there's automations to be considered around the procurement cycle as well. You know, with procuring either services through subcontractors or parts and materials.
Yeah, well, a lot of the major merchants now are investing heavily in their own e-business systems, and there's integration options for, first of all, looking at the availability of stock and then actually ordering it from the supplier's system, and for that to automatically appear back into the management system.
Yeah, which leads us to driving efficiency from the field service perspective. It's all about first time fix, right? It's all about making sure you've got what you need when you get there, you've got the information, you've got the parts, you've got the wherewithal to do that first time fix.
Yeah, and simple things like who's the best available engineer with the right skill set for this job. So in a manual environment, that's quite a labour intensive exercise to figure out who's available, where are they in the country right now, who's the most efficient resource to send to this job.
And a lot of that is sitting in someone's head a lot of the time in these businesses, and if we can get that out of someone's head and make some sort of automated process that assists with that and suggests who that best engineer should be based on historical data, then obviously, you know, we're giving everybody the same ability rather than that you know, Jane that sits in the corner that knows everything about the workforce.
I think that works really well, like for reactive jobs, but a lot of the jobs, obviously, that the contractors are doing a planned preventative maintenance that's booked in advance. What tools should we be helping the customers with in terms of planned maintenance that might be booked days, weeks, months ahead?
Well, yeah, I think that planned element, I think we need to be able to surface what that schedule looks like really easily on a kind of, I guess, a diary of some sort, so that when we do get those reactive calls, we don't go to a site that we're going to be at in 2 days' time to do a reactive, and we can bring that down together and obviously drive efficiency through that process.
Yeah, and then I suppose if we've got an engineer with, so, I don't know, 3 to 6 jobs booked in for a day in the future, we can look to leverage things like route scheduling tools to optimise the travel time from home back to home, obviously with all the jobs in the middle.
Absolutely, and then taking into account the procurement, make sure that the parts, if they need to be ordered, are here in time to do that work.
Yeah, okay. What about just repetitive, sort of trivial admin tasks that happen day in, day out in the back office of all of these contractors? What other things can we do as a tech provider to automate some of these processes so that they're relieved of having to carry them out?
It can be as simple as an automation script that sits in the background. It runs in the background. It might run overnight. It might do, run 3 times, 4 times a day. It depends what that process looks like. But repetitive tasks like that are quite easy to automate with tech now.
So what's a good example of that? Would it be like sending a report to a customer on a frequency? Or
Sure, it might be summarising the jobs for the week, the jobs for the day, and then emailing that to a given location. It might be sharing that to a given FTP site or something like that. And that's something we can easily do through automated processes.
But when I've spoken to contractors about connecting the field engineers to the back office, one of the things that they tend to get excited about is the idea of getting rid of paperwork that's over and above a job sheet. So some sort of compliance certification, whether it's a risk assessment, whether it's a service checklist. But being able to digitise those forms means that if the engineer can complete them as part of the standard workflow, that information hasn't got to be then rekeyed by somebody in the back office. And the other benefit is we're not waiting for that information to come back before we can effectively invoice the client as well.
Absolutely, you're going to speed up that invoice turnaround time. Also, the information that comes back, whilst it'd be nice to visualize that as a report, a PDF, or a document that can be shared with the customer via the portal or via email. That data, if we can sit that data in a database, we can then get sort of trend analysis off the back of that data. We can mine that data to understand what's happening in the field.
Okay, so something I think everybody's interested in right now, and a bit of a buzzword, and you probably know what I'm going to say, is AI, artificial intelligence. I've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
And what is it, first of all? Can you give me an English explanation for AI that everybody can understand? And we're told it's going to disrupt the world, and I've got no reason to disbelieve that. So how's it going to disrupt our part of the world? How's it going to disrupt the HVAC industry? So two things for you to think about.
It's a broad subject, that, but let's try and address it bit by bit. So AI, when people think about AI, they think about ChatGPT, they think about Copilot, these things that are in our faces day to day. That's what's known as NLP, or natural language processing. And that's really about handling large amounts of data, either written or spoken, and processing and summarizing it in fast time, basically. So it's large volumes of data, understanding English language and being able to summarize and report on that. We've got another type of AI, which is called ML, or machine learning, and that's more around pattern recognition. Okay, so this is looking at patterns in data, trends in data, and then learning from that pattern to be able to predict or suggest what might happen next.
Got it. Okay. And then we've been talking about productivity gains for contractors. The cogs start turning and you start thinking about opportunities for AI, for efficiency gains. And the obvious one that springs to mind then, if you think about ML, think about machine learning and pattern recognition, is the ability to automatically QC things, like engineer forms, to say this looks great, this doesn't look great, there's an action required on this job.
Yeah, it's more around the NLP model. Okay. And what it's about is there are standard industry forms around HVAC, right?
Yeah.
As there are around most industries. It's difficult where you've got custom forms that are very specific, but across industry standard forms, it's easy to teach an AI engine what looks good. So what does compliant look like? Is it within this range? Is this box ticked? That kind of thing. It's called sentiment analysis.
Right.
Okay. So what we can then do is we can get all of these forms and all of this data coming back from the mobile workforce, and AI can intercept that, compare it to what is good, say they're all fine, here's the ones you need to worry about. So we're taking lots and lots of data to a small data that's around exception and needs attention by the human being.
Okay. And how do you think AI can help field engineers in terms of doing their job? At the moment, let's assume they've got a mobile app, they've got good asset data that we talked about at the start, they can see the service history of an asset. What else can AI do to help these guys in the field?
The obvious one is the sort of voice to text AI model, where they could just dictate into the mobile device rather than having to type loads and loads of notes, things like that. Image recognition and processing, so they can take pictures of assets, they can get further assistance from the back office around what might be required. There's a number of things that we could push to the engineer in the field.
Do you see a scenario where we get to the stage where both people that work in the back office of a contract, and whether they're scheduling or taking calls or working in the finance department, and the field engineers are getting assistance from some sort of bot that's helping them to say, what do I do next?
Absolutely,
Can you suggest to me what the next action is? I'm thinking about things like, I can check a tracking device to see who the closest engineer is to a job. But what about being able to ask a bot, who's the best engineer to send, based on a variety of, factors?
And this is where ML comes in, because we can learn over a period of time what was the decision-making process to arrive at the fact that Fred's the best guy to do that job. There's always a number of factors involved. It could be geography, it could be skill set, it could be availability, it could be a number of things. But ML models can learn what that looks like and then suggest based on that pattern.
Okay, so when we talked initially about the burden on the back office of a HVAC contractor and so many repeatable tasks that are being carried out, AI could really disrupt that, freeing up people's time to spend more time with customers, or potentially the contractor can take on far more customers.
Absolutely.
and not have to increase their number of people that they've got as the supporting mechanism at the same ratio.
Absolutely. I mean, just the summarization piece is huge. Okay, so if you think about the main entities that these guys deal with, customers, sites, assets, jobs, invoices, purchase orders, the ability to summarize that data rather than having to go into loads of different parts or even disparate systems and understand what's happened in the life cycle of that job or that customer or that asset is a massive saving in time. I spoke to a contractor recently about job summarization and what they have to do to report to their customers about what their activity is. And being able to summarize a job by clicking a button and having it seconds later can save 28, 35 hours a week.
And do you think that, as well as summarization, which I presume would be some sort of text display back to the user to summarize an entity, like a job history or a site history, if you consider right now that a lot of people have built management reports and visualize them in the form of dashboards, whether they're hard-coded or they're built through a dashboard builder like Power BI or Tableau or a tool like that, do you see a stage where we can visualize dashboard reporting information on demand in real time that's drawn for us by an AI model?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this isn't science fiction. We can do this now. The NLP model understands the prompt, plain language prompt. I want this. Then it builds queries in the background to drive a set of results via the data set and be able to visualize that in a report mechanism, in a dashboard mechanism, or even just talk back to you and give you a summary.
So alongside AI, another buzzword that I hear a lot in the industry is predictive maintenance around IoT, sensor data, and a layer of AI on top of that to get to a stage where we can effectively suppress unnecessary planned preventative maintenance, and we can start to get around to fixing equipment before it breaks. And what can you tell us about the direction the industry is going and what the challenges might be?
Well, I think manufacturers in the industry are now making all of the equipment they produce smart. So we're talking about IoT sensors, building management system links to enable the asset to talk to us about its condition. Okay, and then that's all well and good, and we can monitor condition, but that still really takes a human being to monitor that. So the next step on from that is having some sort of rules engine that can interpret constant data feeds from the asset and understand when something's going wrong. And then if we can teach a rules engine when an intervention might be required, then AI steps in and then either creates the job automatically or tells the operative that an intervention is required.
Okay. And I suppose if you've got history of previous asset failure, you've also got information about how the fix was performed previously and including what spare parts were fitted or...
Absolutely. And not only that, we could have, you could have a factory where there's a big fan on the roof and it's got a stiff bearing and it's run hot, but it's run hot for the last 6 years and never been a problem. So it's not just about black and white, it's about trends of information.
Got it. Okay. And in terms of BMS systems, I mean, BMS systems have been around forever, but what you're saying is that you've got an element of human intervention required there, and it might be that the data that's being produced by BMS systems is often just being ignored and not actually being interrogated because of the sheer volume of it.
Absolutely. I mean there's tons and tons of data generated by BMS systems and people use a fraction of it. But if that data can be analysed automatically without that human intervention, then obviously it's powerful data. It's telling you exactly what's going on in that building.
And what are some of the challenges around getting access to the data itself, to be able to mine it and to look at, to be able to feed it into an ML engine, for example?
It's always been a problem because there's never been a standard across all of these different systems. There's never been a data standard.
Right.
But AI is clever enough to be able to understand. There's things like BACnet and stuff now where we can interpret that and collate that information. And AI is a little bit cleverer at doing that a lot quicker.
Got it. So let's say there's this leap to a bit of a utopia where things are getting fixed before they break and unnecessary maintenance is being suppressed and it's not being carried out. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that pose a challenge for the commercial model for a HVAC contractor about how they charge for their time?
Absolutely, it does, yeah. They're moving towards being more of an insurance policy against asset downtime than they are about going to fix it whether it needs it or not.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get people's thoughts on how quickly they think this disruption will happen, and then what it means for their commercial relationship with their customers.
And what are they doing to prepare for it?
Yeah, good point.
Interesting stuff. Thanks, Jim. It's been good to hear your thoughts today. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Please do comment on the post. Let us know what challenges you're facing in the business and what you're doing to try and drive efficiency and productivity in your business.
Yeah, been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. I think we've hopefully covered a few interesting topics. Hopefully it's been a bit, thought-provoking for the audience. And yeah, we'd love to get feedback on any topics for a future conversation where we can hopefully add a little bit of value and prompt a bit of discussion. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.